Hello there, a very good evening to you. You're watching us on a Thursday evening after about a week. This is Vantage Point. Well, it has been a very interesting week. We've seen so many developments happening in the political arena, and to talk about that, we've got Dr. Vantage here with us in the studio. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good to be here.
It has been making a lot of rounds, even in social media. We see this whole controversy surrounding the bond issuance really taking place at the Presidential Commission of Inquiry. Two whistleblowers have come out from Perpetual Treasuries itself, and they've acknowledged, and they've even acknowledged that they've tampered with evidence, namely Inwal Salguda and Sachin Devatantri. Well, this was basically the mess, a 40 billion mess that was made by Perpetual Treasuries is finally coming out little by little, and there's a lot of other issues that are spiraling out of this. Well, do you think now we are in the final phase of the conclusion of inquiries?
No, Stephanie, I don't think so, because, you know, the crucial questions are who set this rolling. I mean, Arjuna Aloysius, whatever he did and didn't do, was enabled to do this. How was he in position? How was PTL in position to do all this? The evidence so far shows that there was a lot of fudging. The government deficit wasn't what they said it was. So there have been a lot of lies along the way. The earlier testimony showed that Arjuna Mahendran deviated from not only established procedure but also precedents. I mean, he did stuff that his predecessors had not done. In the meantime, on the outside, the UNP said, hey, what about Nivad Cabral, when he was the governor of the central bank? And Nivad Cabral wrote in and said, please call me in. I really would like to talk about this. But nobody called him in because he made it very clear that he was quite confident about his ability to not only justify what he did, but to show the difference between what he did and what Arjuna Mahendran had done. So, Stephanie, I don't think this is the closing stage at all, because now it's really getting interesting. One of the whistleblowers has said that he got instructions to crash the computer.
Yes.
Another guy says he was told to delete all the phone records.
Right.
Now, who gave the instructions, and why was that person who gave the instructions so confident that he could get away with it? How, as I said, were they positioned there? How was all of this, how was the chicken coop opened up for the fox? Who opened it? That is the crucial question. How high up does this go? And in the famous old question in American politics, at whose desk does the buck stop? So that needs to be uncovered.
But this whole inquiry is on the basis of insider trading. Has Sri Lanka ever been involved, or has any company in Sri Lanka been involved in such an incident to this magnitude?
Well, it's like this, Stephanie. I'm sure that there's been quite a bit of this. What there has never been is that the central bank has been raided in this way, has been used, has been misused. So it's really the target that is the daring involved, because this is the highest point of the fiscal management of your economy. If your central bank has been raided and used, then what's sacred? Nothing sacred. It's not as if insider trading is usually you've got a friend somewhere in decision making who knows what's going on, and then you meet for coffee, and then you remind that guy or girl that, well, you've been in university together, you've had good time, so what's going on, and so on and so forth. And they let you know what's going on, and you do something and they also benefit.
Right.
That's insider trading. It's bad. It's what you see in the movies. And I've seen plenty movies. I haven't seen a single movie which involves the central bank of a country.
Right.
So this is different, Stephanie.
Well, can this be mended? Can the credibility, the central bank of Sri Lanka that has already lost or already in the process of losing, can it be ever mended? Can it be brought back, as in people who have lost credibility in the central bank of Sri Lanka, at least after this whole incident? Do you think that it can be brought back or it can be built back?
Yes, yes. I'm very happy that President Sirisena appointed this commission. I think that from the commissioner onwards, or the commissioner downwards, or sideways, or whichever way you want to put it, the whole commission has done very well. The bond scam itself is a terrible advertisement for Yahapalana, but the Presidential Commission is a good advertisement. And I think that if the commission is allowed to do its job unimpeded and is given the necessary time to do it, I think that the entire cancer can be cut out.
Whom do you think will be prosecuted through all of this? As in, how many of them will be pulled out after the inquiry to really go behind bars? Do you think that will be the only conclusion of the inquiry?
Well, again, Stephanie, there's this phrase about the organ grinder and the monkey. The ones who are being questioned, or the trail is now leading to certain people, but one doesn't know whether they are the organ grinders or whether they're only the monkeys. So you need to know who was the organ grinder behind the monkeys. Who is the one who played the organ for the monkeys to do the dancing? That we do not know. Once we know that, then we'll be able to see whether such people will be put behind bars, or whether there will be some other form of action, punitive action, such as maybe at least a no confidence motion in Parliament if they are politicians, or even a presidential intervention where the President removes certain people who he thinks have been found guilty by the Commission. So we shall have to wait and see, but I think the process is going very well. I have admiration not only for the Commission, but also for these people, especially, I mean, most of them are young, not all of them, from, Anika Vijaysurya, these people who blew the whistle. I mean, that's something new. It's a good example set globally by the whole tradition of whistleblowing. You've got movies about whistleblowers, what happened with Big Tobacco, for instance. There's the movie with Al Pacino and Robert Redford and so on. And then you have the iconic whistleblowers of today, that is Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. So there is a new tradition of whistleblowing. Whistleblowing is an old practice, but with social media, whistleblowing has become far more revolutionary in its impact. In a sense, the Arab Spring was triggered by a WikiLeaks dump about what the rulers in those countries had done before. So I have a lot of admiration for the employees who are telling the truth. Obviously, they hold themselves up to a higher standard of behavior. To those officials of the central bank who spoke up, to the Commission, and of course the Auditor General. I mean, he was one of the first resistors. He was hauled up before court and given a dressing down, but he stood very firm.
Well, before we head into a short commercial break, we said that right in the beginning of the program that there were a number of highlights of the week, and We'll next discuss about a report that Newsfirst was able to dig out. It's about a consortium that was an unlawful consortium that was made between two famous Japanese companies. When you come back after this short commercial break. Hello there, you're watching Vantage Point, and just before the break I reminded you that there is also another highlight that was made during the past week, and which was about the consortium that was formed between Fujita and another company called Taisei Corporation. When the bidding process started for the third phase of the Central Expressway, Fujita was an unqualified bidder under different reasons. And it didn't meet the criteria, but Taisei Corporation on the other hand had met the criteria, so this cabinet minister decides to put those two companies together and make a consortium, which is really unlawful, and it's apparently a violation of the national procurement guidelines itself. Why would there be such misconduct on part of a minister under the guise of development itself? Sri Lanka is trying to grow as a country, or at least trying to achieve targets in terms of infrastructure, building bridges and roads, but there's also this other market, a black market so to speak, that's happening right behind closed doors. When there is a committee that's appointed to take care of the bidding process, the minister uses his powers to go against the committee that was formed for this purpose of seeing whether or not a company is qualified to do the job or not. And then it's how far do you think powers can be used in this manner, as in vested powers in ministers, and there's another power that's vested in committees to do the job, but then who is right here and what power should be used?
Well, Stephanie, I mean, obviously I can't speak to the conduct of the minister, but I can venture some hypotheses as to why politicians may be behaving in this way. One factor is that there isn't any real big development happening. So when it's like an idle mind being the devil's workshop, when you don't have any real big development taking place, then the mind of some ministers probably focuses on making money, not making money as a byproduct of genuine development, but making money by ripping off or doing things that shouldn't be done. Now, what do I mean by big development? I'm not talking here about the famous Mahinda Rajapaksa infrastructure post-war period. I'm talking about the UNP that we knew. After 1977, you had the huge Mahavali project. You had so many things happening. Even something which didn't have foreign funds, Kettarama, the stadium. The Kettarama stadium was built by Mr. Premadasa and Mr. Sirisenakure in 6 months, and it was a marshy land. 6 months, they didn't get a single dollar from anywhere. It was all from municipal funds. What they did was they bunched up the rates. Now you pay municipal rates. They very transparently rescheduled it so you get a lot of money at one time, but it's the same money that you would have had to pay, and they used it and built a stadium. Today what do I see? That Rajagiriya flyover, I mean, I pass that every day. They can't get that right. I mean, they talk about so many things, connecting up with the world and opening up to the world and the world coming here and we are going to the world and so on. They can't get that Rajagiriya flyover right. I mean, the cameras show that there's something a little wrong and all the traffic gets snarled up there anyway. So there's nothing moving in terms of real development. Therefore, the only thing that's moving is the gravy train. If you can cut a deal, promise something, sell something, lease something else, and make some money, you try to do that.
Right.
That is one psychological factor that's at work here. The other is the UNP has not led the country for 23 years. Led the country means it's a party that produced 6 presidents and prime ministers. That's leaders of the country. Prime ministers when we had a Westminster model. Presidents, it had 3 presidents. So 6 leaders of the country. But for 23 years, the same 23 years that the present Prime Minister has been leader of the UNP, the UNP has never led the country, never been the head of state, head of government and so on. So there's a kind of a psychological malaise. There's a feeling that, we'll never make it to the top again. We have to go along with these SLFP guys. I mean, nothing's happening. It's a mess. It's anarchic. So, darn it. Might as well make some money while they're at it. Cut corners, bend some rules and so on.
Right.
That's another factor. The third factor is a sense that one is growing old. Now, many of the names that have come up are people who are a little, long in the tooth. I'm also a little long in the tooth, but still. So they're people who want to make some money before they go. And the fourth and final hypothesis I wish to venture is that there is a shrewd sense that this is going to be a one-term administration. I mean, this is because those who know the history of the UNP know that except for the Javadana Premadasa period, the UNP has almost always been a one-term. It's always been one-term because they're so polarizing. So 65, 52, 56, one term, 65, 70, one term, Mr. Wickramasinghe, 2001, 2004, one term. So there's a sense that this is going to be a one-term administration. They're all going to be home by 2020.
But
so
they're
you may as well make money.
But they're making long-term plans. They have already, the Prime Minister himself has read out the economic plan for the
2025.
For the 2025.
Come on.
For the third term.
Let them get that Rajagiri flyover right before I take them seriously on that one. I mean, they can't do a thing right.
Do you think UNP has a future? As in, even after the central bank bond transaction issue, we still have a lot of support for the UNP in Colombo at least.
Well, in Colombo, but then the UNP always had support in Colombo, Stephanie.
So how exactly can you break that mindset of UNP being clean, or majority of UNPers being the clean ones?
Well, the history of the UNP is one in which it's at its best. It's been like a company, and if it finds that its share of the market is dropping, it makes changes. That's the way it used to be. Now, the Senanayaka model, it worked for a while and then it didn't work. And when it didn't work, you had dissent within the party. Jaya Javadana, R. Premadasa, in the early 70s after the UNP had lost badly in 1970. Right. And there was a new model UNP. Far more grassroots oriented. But today's UNP is stuck in the penthouse. It has no grassroots appeal. It will be down to its base vote, and the base vote, as we have seen before under Mr. Wickramasinghe, is sometimes as low as 29%. No, I saw something funny the other day, amusing. There's this young songwriter, singer-songwriter who has nothing to do with the Rajapaksas. Iraj Veeratna, the hip-hop guy. Yeah. He studied at Yale for a while. Yeah. So, he's quite young and trendy. But
he had actually supported the former president during the campaign, yes.
I thought he was with the Yahapalana people?
He's had a
Wasn't he with Yahapalana as well, with the hip-hop thing?
Yes.
Yeah. So he's got a new video. And there's it's about a kid who gets married and the dad and so on and so forth. This is a cute thing. And in that, one of the frames has the results of the next presidential election. And the UNP candidate, Mr. Wickremesinghe, is in this frame down to 29.2. Now, I remember, in fact, the UNP was down to 29.2 under Mr. Wickremesinghe some time ago. So it's not being very unkind, it's just saying that, look, it's going to drop down to what it used to be before President Sirisena gave it a leg up. And I think that's the way it's going. Now, the UNP will never be extinct. It's a deeply rooted party. But it has to make the shift that it usually makes. It made that shift in the 1970s and became the party that retained power for three terms, 2 terms of Jayawardena, 1 term of Premadasa. And that's because it changed drastically. It was a very innovative grassroots party. It took only 1 rupee to be a member of the UNP under Mr. Jayawardena in opposition. I think the UNP will have to lose, and if it goes under new management, very drastically different management, it may re-emerge a very powerful party again. Well, and I hope it does, because I believe in a 2-party system and democracy. I hope it does, but that's going to have to take a defeat. Well,
there's another party that's really suffering the consequences of the leaders' solutions, the leaders' decisions. That's
SLP.
No, out of the country actually. In the United States, the Republicans are coming under a lot of fire. They're coming under a lot of fire within the party itself.
I mean, Steve Bannon, he had a kind of an amicable divorce with Donald Trump, and Trump still praises him.
Exactly.
And Bannon, who was their top gun, he's gone back to Breitbart.
John Kelly, yeah.
And he said that he's going to continue the fight against, not Trump, but against Trump's enemies in the Republican Party from the outside. And he's gone for them hell for leather.
We'll definitely talk about that after this short commercial break, so stay tuned. Good evening to you. Welcome back to Vantage Point. We're talking about world affairs, and when we say world affairs, it's definitely the US that we start with, because US is making headlines day in and day out, and now North Korea's hydrogen bomb has come under a lot of fire. It fired the missile, the 6th missile to be precise, and it landed in water. South Korea is trembling, and Japan is also trying to put something together in order to contain North Korea. China is angry with the US for not handling this properly, and the United States is firing up at China for really siding with North Korea. Donald Trump is under a lot of fire from the party, from his Republican Party. The Congress is at war. It's a whole lot of mess that's going on around the world, but do you think North Korea's missile test, or the 6th missile test as it claims, is just something that the world is blowing out of proportion? Is it a powerful enough country to really fire the United States, or even be a threat to the entire world and threat to world peace itself?
No, absolutely not. At best, what the North Koreans are doing is trying to build up a deterrent, to say, if you attack us, you've attacked us in the past, you've got sanctions against us. If you attack us, we have the capacity to fire missiles at your ally South Korea and maybe even Japan, your ally Japan. The smart money says that what the North Koreans are trying to do is really get the United States to negotiate a removal of sanctions, a version of what the Iranians did, but the Iranians weren't quite this theatrical, but the Iranians did manage to get a deal.
Right.
Now, I have a lot of respect for the new president of South Korea, because he has said there mustn't be, and he's not going to permit, a war on the Korean peninsula. Because it's South Korea that knows that if the United States strikes North Korea, you could have North Korean conventional troops, and there are a huge number of conventional troops, moving south. And even if the conventional troops don't come south, terrified civilians in their millions, starving civilians will flood.
Start flying in.
So I think that the South Korean president and the South Korean people. They are very important, and they are right when they say there is no military solution. In this matter, they are on the same page, though they are not allied in any way, with China and Russia, which also say there's only a diplomatic solution. But Nikki Haley, President Trump's PR in New York, has been sounding very, very martial. And I think the last thing I have to say about this is this lovely cartoon. I think it was in the New York Times. I saw where one of his aides, top aides, is telling President Trump, Mr. President, I mean, we can't have a guy with a funny haircut with his finger on the nuclear button. You know, and then he pauses and he says, let me rephrase that. Supposedly talking about Kim Jong-un, you know. Sorry, let me rephrase that. So there you are. There's so much pressure in the United States, US politics. There's always a temptation, which you saw in that movie, Wag the Dog. There's always temptation to go for some military strike somewhere in order to take attention away from the political trouble that you have at home.
Well, can Trump actually find the perfect mix of whether it's diplomatic solutions or talks or sanctions? And what if Trump doesn't find the perfect mix and he does something drastic? Do you think that will actually be a threat to world peace?
Well, certainly a threat to peace in the region, and there will be havoc because, as I said, the North Koreans have a huge conventional army, and you can't kill them all off. And you also have the possibility of civilians flooding in to the south. So that will be a disaster. I don't think there's a military option, but then President Trump his presidency is now like a runaway train without brakes. So you never know. There might be some military action in North Korea which will trigger disastrous consequences.
Well, just before we wrap up, just 2 minutes of the time we'll take to talk about immigration itself. He's going to put a full stop to the DACA program, which gives young children who had fled with their parents to the country a leeway. But now there's no leeway for the people who have actually come with their parents. So do you think it's right for a child to reap the benefits of this parents' spoils, even if it's an illegal measure that was taken by the parent themselves?
Well, Stephanie, I mean, the United States was founded on the phrase, give me your huddled masses. That was the place where people from all over the world could flee persecution and find a home and start afresh. Many of these were, I mean, these were immigrants, right, fleeing persecution. So President Trump, who's supposed to be an American nationalist, is turning his back on the finest traditions which accompanied the very founding of the United States of America.
Well, before we wrap up, we cannot talk about immigration and not talk about the Rohingya Muslims who are fleeing Myanmar and spilling over to Bangladesh. Do you think Aung San Suu Kyi, as a leader, the commanding leader of the party itself, even though she's not the president, is taking the right stand in giving enough necessary protection for the people of...
Well, Stephanie, you know, she can always do a Chandrika Bandaranaike, but then she won't be in power if she does that. She has to balance the Buddhist majority, the very powerful military, and for Aung San Suu Kyi, the most important thing is that she's put the military back in barracks more or less. She can't afford to have them come out again and take over power and roll back the democratization. And then she has the Rohingya problem. So she has to balance all of this, and I think she's, I trust her. I mean, I think she's doing her best in a very difficult situation. As I said, she can always go the Chandrika route, but then, you know, the military will take over, the majority will turn against her, and she'll have to go back to Britain or something.
Right. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us. It was a great pleasure having you with us on Vantage Point.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you very much for joining us. Remember, you can write us whatever you think we should ask on the program. Send us your views, your questions, your grievances even. It's at Newsfirst@maharaj.lk. This is Vantage Point. See you next fortnight. Good night.